Hello, my friend. Today I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins.
The wind blew cold from the north, sweeping down from the gray mountains and stirring the flags upon the towers of Erebor. The lonely mountain stood proud beneath a waning moon, its crown silvered by frost and starlight. Deep within its halls, beneath the throne carved from the heart of stone, sat Durin VII, heir of the Longbeards, son of Dain Ironfoot's line, and last bearer of the ancient name that had endured through the ages of the world. Though young by the reckoning of dwarves, Durin carried the weight of many generations. His beard was still a dark bronze, untinged by the gray of years. Yet his eyes bore that deep and quiet fire that once belonged to the fathers of old. For many nights, he had lingered in the archives of Erebor, poring over crumbling scrolls and cracked stone tablets, remnants of Khazad-dûm, once the greatest of dwarven realms. It was on such a night that Durin found it, a shard of parchment sealed in resin, half burnt but still bearing the careful runes of an elder scribe. He brushed away the dust and read by lamplight. Herein lies the tale of Durin's gift, the dragon's amulet, wrought in the first days of Khazad-dûm, blessed by Aule the Maker. Whoso bears it shall walk unharmed amid the fires of the serpent kind. Durin leaned closer. The script faltered midway, the edges torn and blackened by time. Yet the name that followed was clear. Scatha the Worm. His heart quickened. Scatha, the long-dead dragon of the north, whose hoard had been plundered in ages past by the Eotheod, forefathers of Rohan. The amulet, it seemed, had been among that treasure, and then vanished. For years, Durin's people had rebuilt Erebor from the ruin left by Smaug, restoring its forges and mines. Yet in their songs there remained a note of longing for Khazad-dûm, the lost homeland under the misty mountains, and for the glories of old. This relic, this dragon's amulet, was more than a jewel. It was a memory of power, of endurance, of the unbroken bond between the dwarves and the Maker who shaped them. Durin rose from his seat. The lamplight gleamed on his mail shirt, and his eyes were bright with resolve. "This must be found," he murmured, the sound echoing softly against the stone. "If it lies still in the north, then by the beard of my fathers, I shall bring it home." At dawn he called a council in the king's hall. The lords of Erebor gathered, seasoned warriors, miners, and smiths, their beards glinting with gold and mithril rings. Among them stood Narin, the broad-shouldered captain of Durin's guard, Fror, the lore-keeper, old and stooped, yet sharp as a pickaxe, and Dwalin's grandson Fundar, a bold red-haired dwarf known for his temper and laughter alike. Durin laid the ancient parchment before them. "This is our charge," he said, "a relic of Durin Mioi, hidden since the slaying of Scatha. I would seek it in the Grey Mountains." A murmur rose. The Grey Mountains had long been abandoned. Wild, broken lands haunted by orcs, cold drakes, and worse. Even the dwarves of the Iron Hills spoke of them with caution. Narin crossed his arms. "My king, many have gone north and not returned. The old hordes lie buried beneath ruin and snow. What is one amulet against such peril?" Durin met his gaze steadily. "It is not the gold I seek, Narin, but the proof that our fathers' hands did not labor in vain. Every stone we recover, every relic we restore, brings us closer to reclaiming Khazad-dûm." There was a long silence. Then Fror, the lore-keeper, spoke, his voice thin but firm. If the tale be true, my king, and the amulet was indeed wrought by Durin the Deathless, then it is more than a jewel. It may be a token of blessing, perhaps even a key to the old halls beneath the mountain. At that, murmurs turned to assent. The thought of Khazad-dûm stirred every dwarf's heart. By noon, the decision was made. Durin would set forth with a company of 12, chosen for skill and loyalty. They would travel light, following the ancient paths northward through the dale, then into the wild lands beyond the arid Mithrin. As preparations began, the forges of Erebor roared to life. Armor was hammered and sharpened, runes of protection etched into axe and helm. Durin's own weapon, Barazrun, gleamed with inlaid silver, its edge older than the mountain itself. Before their departure, Durin stood upon the steps of Erebor, looking out over the land. The river Kelduin shimmered in the distance, winding like a silver thread beneath the sun. Beside him, Fundar grinned beneath his helm. Adventure again, eh? My grandsire would have loved this. Durin smiled faintly, and he would have complained about the rations. They both laughed, a sound bright and brief as struck iron. Yet beneath their mirth lay a quiet understanding. Many who went north did not return. As the company rode forth that evening, a hush fell upon the mountain. The great gates of Erebor closed behind them with a deep, final note. They passed through Dale at twilight, greeted by the townsfolk with torches and song, and by dawn they were gone. 12 dwarves and their king, vanishing into the misty wilds. Above them, clouds gathered over the northern peaks, dark and heavy with snow. In that deepening gray, unseen and silent, a shadow moved, vast wings brushing the air like thunder. Far in the cold north, something stirred in the hollows of the mountains. The scent of dwarves, faint but familiar, had reached an ancient, slumbering thing. And in that darkness, golden eyes opened once more. Days turned into weeks as Durin's company pressed northward, leaving the green lands of Dale behind. The air grew thinner, colder, and the wind carried the scent of iron and snow. The mountains loomed ahead like jagged teeth, their crowns white even under the noonday sun. The gray mountains, arid Mithrin, home once to proud dwarves, now to beasts and silence. They journeyed along the old dwarven road, long broken and half buried under the creeping wild. Ruined milestones marked their way, their runes worn smooth by centuries of wind. The company moved cautiously, for the land was not empty. Crows followed them from afar, and once, beneath a crescent moon, Naren glimpsed a shadow, slinking between the rocks. Wargs, he muttered, tightening his grip upon his axe. Hungry, perhaps, or watching. Durin nodded, his gaze scanning the ridges. Let them watch, then. The sons of Durin fear no carrion beasts. Each night they camped within narrow valleys or beneath leaning cliffs, lighting small fires that glowed like stars against the dark stone. Fundar told tales to keep the cold at bay, of Dane Ironfoot's battles, of the fall of Smaug, of Balin's doomed venture into Moria. The older dwarves listened in silence, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. For many among them had kin who never returned from Khazad-dûm, and the telling of those stories weighed heavy upon their hearts. On the 15th day they reached the Gundalak Pass, a narrow defile between two towering peaks. Beyond it, the northern wastes spread out, barren and harsh. There they found the remains of an ancient outpost, low walls of stone, blackened by fire, dwarven work without doubt, though centuries old. Fror the lore-keeper walked among the ruins, brushing the frost from the stones. "This was Tamgarin, the watchfort of the north," he said quietly, "built to guard against dragons and orcs. I thought it long lost." Durin knelt beside a half-buried gate, tracing the carvings with his gloved hand. "Then perhaps it guards still," he murmured. "Search every hall. There may be records left, maps, ledgers, anything that speaks of Scatha or his horde." They worked through the fading light, prying open sealed doors and clearing fallen beams. Deep within the ruins, they found a small chamber, miraculously untouched by time. Within stood a stone table upon which lay a chest, bound in rusted iron. Narin struck off the lock with his axe, and Fror lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside, wrapped in dry, brittle cloth, was a bundle of tablets, records of the outpost written in Khuzdul. Fror's eyes widened as he read by torchlight. Year of the Third Age 2012. Word came of Scatha's death in the north. Men of the Aotheod bore off much of his treasure, but one gem, bright as flame and cold as ice, was lost in the worm's den. The jewel wrought by Durin the First. A curse lies upon it, they say. The amulet that turns aside dragonfire may yet guard the spirit of the beast that once wore it. He looked up slowly. The worm's den. They call it Narug Zahar, the pit of the dragon. It lies beyond these mountains, in the frozen valleys of Forodwaith. A heavy silence followed. The name alone carried a chill deeper than any wind. The northernmost reaches were a wasteland of ice and ruin where no dwarf had set foot in 1,000 years. Durin's eyes, however, burned with resolve. "Then that is where we go." That night, while the others slept, he stood upon the ramparts of the ruined fort, gazing into the dark north. The stars were sharp and cold, and far away, thunder rolled among the peaks. He felt the weight of his forefathers pressing upon him. Durin the Deathless, Durin the Third, Durin the Sixth, and all the kings who had risen and fallen. The dragon's amulet was not merely a relic. It was a piece of their ancient strength, a token of endurance against shadow and flame. When dawn came, they pressed onward. The terrain grew crueler with every league. Snowdrifts reached to their waists, and the wind howled like a living thing. Ice clung to their beards, and the iron of their boots cracked upon frozen stone. Yet they endured, for the sons of Durin were made of granite and stubborn pride. One evening they came upon a ravine where smoke curled faintly from the rocks. Thinking it the vent of some sleeping fire beneath the earth, they descended and found instead the remnants of a camp. Broken spears, burnt torches, and the bones of men lay scattered among the stones. Narin crouched and examined a blackened helm. "Orcs," he said grimly, "and not long gone." Fror nodded. "Then we are not alone in this wilderness." That night they kept watch in shifts. The air was still, but in the distance they heard faint cries, the howling of wolves, mingled with something deeper, a low, dragging roar that set their hearts to pounding. When morning came, the sky was a dull iron gray. They followed the ravine northward until the land fell away into a vast basin, a desolation of ice and broken stone. At its heart rose a single peak, black and jagged, smoke coiling faintly from its summit. Fror's voice dropped to a whisper. "Narug Zahar." They descended in silence. The wind grew heavy with the scent of ash. Great rents scarred the mountain's sides, as though something vast had clawed its way free long ago. At the base of the peak, they found a narrow fissure, half hidden by snow. The air that flowed from it was warm and within glowed a faint red light. Durin turned to his company. "Here lies the lair of the beast. We make camp here. At dawn, we enter." That night, the company sat close about their fire, speaking little. Even Fundar, whose laughter had always rung loudest, was silent. The flicker of the flames danced upon their faces, reflecting the unease that none dared voice. At last, Fundar broke the silence. "My king," he said quietly, "if the beast yet lives, if it guards the amulet still, will we face it?" Durin looked into the fire. "Aye," he said softly. "If it lives, we shall face it, for it is not in the nature of Durin's folk to turn aside when the goal is before them." Above them, lightning flashed across the peaks. The snow began to fall, slow and silent, blanketing the camp in white. Deep within the mountain, in halls untouched by sun or moon, a heartbeat stirred, slow, ancient, and filled with malice. Gold shifted upon stone, smoke coiled between blackened ribs. The mountain breathed, and in the heart of the worm's pit, eyes like molten bronze opened in the dark. The morning broke, pale and gray, the sky a sheet of unmoving cloud. Snow whispered down upon the camp, soft as ash. The company rose without a word, their movements slow, deliberate. They had slept little, for the mountain itself had seemed restless in the night. A deep rumbling beneath their feet, faint but unending, as though the earth dreamed of thunder. Durin stood before the mouth of the fissure, the red light flickering across the steel of his armor. Behind him, Naren and Fundar readied ropes and torches, while Fror murmured an old dwarven prayer to Mahal, Aule the Maker. Then Durin lifted his axe, Barazrun, and spoke. "Brothers of the mountain, beyond this gate lies fire and darkness, the hoard of a worm and the work of our fathers. We go not for gold, nor for glory, but for a remembrance, to reclaim what was forged by Durin the Deathless in the elder days. Whatever lies within, we face it together. Let none falter." They answered with a single word, low and resonant. "Kazade Menu." "The dwarves are upon you." Then they entered the mountain. The fissure opened into a steep passage that wound downward through the rock. The walls glowed faintly, streaked with veins of strange reddish ore that pulsed with an inner light, as though the stone itself were alive. The heat grew with every step, and soon their breath came hard beneath the weight of their mail. After a long descent, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow, and the floor gleamed with scales of black glass. The mark of dragon fire. Piles of ash and melted gold lay scattered like dunes. Fundar kicked at a heap of bones and frowned. "Men," he muttered, "and orcs too by the look of it. The beast fed well." Fror examined the walls, tracing the ancient carvings half buried in soot. "Dwarven work," he whispered, "older than Erebor. This must have been part of an outpost before the Drake came. A forge, perhaps." Durin knelt beside a shattered anvil, its surface scored by deep claws. "A forge, aye," he murmured, "and the place where Durin's amulet was wrought." As they moved deeper, the red glow grew stronger. A tremor rippled through the ground, and somewhere far ahead came the echo of a slow, hollow breath. They reached a narrow bridge of stone, spanning a gulf filled with molten rock. Heat rose in shimmering waves, distorting the air. Naren crossed first, moving like a shadow, axe in hand. The others followed one by one until they stood upon the far side before a great archway of obsidian. Beyond it lay the hoard of the worm. Even the dwarves, who cared little for treasure beyond craft and memory, stood in awe. The cavern stretched vast and endless, lit by the dull red glow of molten veins. Gold lay in hills and rivers mingled with gems, blades, and broken crowns. The weight of ages pressed upon them, the wealth of kingdoms devoured and forgotten. At the center of that gleaming waste rose a mound greater than all the rest, and upon it lay the dragon. He was smaller than Smaug of Erebor, yet no less terrible. His scales were dark as old bronze, his wings folded tight against his flanks. Smoke drifted from his nostrils, with each slow exhalation curling into the air like ghosts. Upon his breast, half buried in the treasure, there gleamed a faint light, a cold blue radiance amid the red gloom. "The amulet," whispered Fror. "By the Maker it lives." Durin's eyes fixed upon it. "Then we must take it." Fundar swallowed. "And how, my king, do we do that without waking him?" But Durin did not answer. He was already moving, his steps slow and measured, each footfall silent upon the gold. The others followed, spreading out among the shadows. The air was thick with heat and the scent of sulfur. Sweat ran beneath their armor, and their hearts beat loud in their ears. Durin reached the foot of the mound and began to climb, his gaze locked upon the light that shimmered from beneath the dragon's claw. He was halfway up when the creature stirred. A low growl rolled through the cavern like thunder under stone. The horde shifted, coins slid and rang together. The dragon's eyelids lifted, revealing eyes vast and burning, the color of molten ore. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to halt. Then the worm spoke. "Dwarves," it hissed, the word echoing from the walls. "Little stone crawlers, you dare trespass in the lair of Frarung, son of Skatha?" The company froze. The beast rose, unfurling his wings in a storm of gold and dust. Heat burst from his maw, and the ground shook beneath his claws. Durin lifted his axe. "We seek only that which was made by our fathers, the dragon's amulet. It was forged by Durin the Deathless and stolen by your kind long ago." Frarung's laugh was a sound like cracking stone. "Stolen? Nay, dwarf. My sire took what was his, by right of strength, and I, his heir, shall take what remains, your bones to line my nest." With a roar, the dragon struck. Fire exploded across the chamber, blinding white and crimson. The dwarves dove for cover, shields raised, the heat searing even through their steel. Fundar bellowed and hurled his axe, the blade striking Frarung's flank with a flash of sparks. The beast turned with a snarl, sweeping his tail in a great arc. The blow shattered a pillar and sent Naren sprawling into a heap of gold. Durin charged forward, shouting in Khuzdul, and struck at the dragon's leg. His axe bit deep, splitting scale and flesh. Frarung roared in pain, his breath scorching the stone. "Now!" cried Durin. "Strike together." The dwarves rallied. Blades rang, hammers fell, and the air filled with the thunder of battle. They fought as their fathers had fought in ages past, grim, fearless, unyielding. But the dragon was strong beyond measure. His claws rent armor like parchment, and his fire burned through stone. At last Frarung reared back, his chest heaving. "You cannot slay me, sons of stone," he thundered. "Your kind is broken, your halls lost. I am the fire that ends your line." Durin met his gaze, his face blackened with soot. "Then we shall end in fire, not fear." He leapt forward, driving his axe into the creature's breast, straight into the blue light that gleamed beneath its scales. There was a burst of brilliance, a cry that shook the mountain to its roots, and Frarung fell. The cavern split with the sound of cracking earth. Gold and fire poured down in torrents as the beast collapsed, his lifeblood hissing upon the molten rock. The amulet rolled free, glowing bright and cold upon the stones. Durin staggered forward, his armor scorched, his beard singed. He reached out and took the jewel in his hands. It pulsed with a strange warmth, neither fire nor light, and for a moment he felt as though the mountain itself breathed with him. Behind him, the company gathered, fewer than before. The dead lay silent amid the gold, and the survivors watched in weary awe. Durin raised the amulet high, and its light filled the cavern, driving back the smoke. "Durin's gift is ours again," he said softly, "and with it the memory of our fathers endures." But even as he spoke, a shadow passed over the light. From behind the fallen horde came a sound, the scrape of armor, the hiss of steel, drawn in haste, and in that moment betrayal moved among them like a whisper in the dark. The echoes of the dragon's death still trembled through the mountain. The great cavern was a ruin of smoke and shifting gold, the air hot and bitter with the stench of burnt metal. The dwarves stood amidst the wreckage, their faces blackened, their breath ragged. Of the 12 who had entered Narug-Zahar, only 8 still stood. Durin held the dragon's amulet in both hands. Its blue light throbbed softly, a living heart amid the darkness. It was beautiful beyond words, cold as ice yet warm to the touch, filled with a deep, steady glow that seemed older than the world. Fror approached slowly, leaning on his staff, his face pale with exhaustion. "By the Maker," he whispered, "I never thought to see it. The amulet of Durin the Deathless, born from the fires of Khazad-dûm itself." Durin looked down at the jewel, and yet it was the fire of dragons that kept it from us. He turned to the others. "Gather the fallen. We will leave this place before the mountain buries us all." They moved quickly, though the weight of grief hung heavy on them. Fundar and Narin lifted the body of young Brock, slain by the dragon's tail, and laid him gently beside the others. The gold clinked beneath their boots as they crossed the hall, careful to keep their distance from the dragon's corpse, for even in death, its presence filled the air with dread. The mountain groaned. A tremor passed through the stone, and flakes of dust fell from the vaulted ceiling. Somewhere in the depths, a great crack split the rock. "Move!" Durin shouted. "The worm's death has roused the mountain. We must reach the upper tunnels before it falls." The company fled across the bridge of stone, their torches flickering wildly. Behind them, the horde shifted like a living sea, gold sliding in rivers of molten red. As they passed the threshold of the fissure, a deep roar shook the earth, and the cavern collapsed in on itself. The mountain swallowed its treasure, sealing it forever. When they reached the outer pass, the sky had darkened with storm. Wind howled among the peaks, carrying sleet and snow. They set up a small camp among the rocks, lighting what little fire they could.
For a long while none spoke. The firelight cast weary faces in shades of bronze and shadow. At last Fundar broke the silence. "So it ends," he said grimly. "We have the amulet and the worm is dead, yet I feel no triumph." Durin sat across from him, the jewel cradled in his palm. "Victory is seldom a thing of joy," he said, "only of remembrance." Fror leaned closer, peering at the gem. "It is said that Durin I bound part of his spirit into the amulet that his descendants might never forget their purpose, to build, to endure, to reclaim what was lost. If that is true, my king, then you bear more than a relic, you bear a promise." Durin nodded, though his brow was furrowed. "A promise or a burden? I feel its weight, though it is light in my hand." He set the amulet upon a flat stone, its glow flickering like starlight. The company huddled around it, drawing warmth from its strange fire. For a moment the world seemed still. The storm outside lessened, and the wind carried faint echoes, distant voices, or perhaps the memory of song. But not all hearts in that camp were at peace. Among the survivors was Varric, a younger dwarf from the Iron Hills. His armor was dented, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. All through the battle he had fought fiercely. But since the moment Durin had lifted the amulet, he had spoken little. Now he sat apart from the others, watching the jewel with a hunger he could not hide. When night fell, the company lay down to rest. Durin alone kept watch, the amulet resting beside him. The light of the gem played over his face, painting it in shades of blue and silver. His thoughts were heavy of Erebor, of his people, of the long road home. He did not hear the quiet movement behind him until it was too late. A hand shot from the darkness, snatching the amulet. Durin turned with a shout. "Varric, what madness!" The younger dwarf leapt back, the jewel clutched against his chest. His eyes gleamed with feverish light. "Madness?" he hissed. "Nay, my king. Vision, you saw what it can do. You felt its power. With this, I could forge a kingdom greater than Erebor, richer than Moria. Why should it lie gathering dust beneath your throne?" The others woke, weapons drawn. Fundar rose with a snarl. "Put it down, Varric, you shame your kin." But Varric only laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You speak of shame while your king hoards glory for himself? You think he will share it? The amulet obeys no crown, only strength." He turned to flee, but Durin was already upon him. The two crashed together upon the rocks, struggling in the dark. The amulet flared between them, its light blinding, its hum rising to a sharp, keening tone. "Stop, fool," Durin roared. "It is not meant for your hands." "I will not kneel to another Durin," Varric cried. "Not while I breathe." In the struggle, his foot slipped on the icy stone. The amulet tumbled from his grasp, striking the ground. For an instant, time froze. The jewel flared white, brighter than lightning, and then shattered. The explosion threw them both back. The others shielded their eyes as shards of blue fire rained down upon the snow. When the light faded, the amulet was gone, its pieces scattered, glowing faintly before fading into darkness. Durin rose slowly, smoke curling from his armor. Varric lay nearby, his chest still. The others gathered around, stunned into silence. Fror knelt, his voice trembling. The amulet destroyed. Durin stared at the spot where it had fallen. "No," he said softly, "not destroyed. Released." He turned his gaze northward. The storm had cleared, and through the rent in the clouds, a single star burned bright above the peaks. Its light fell upon them cold and pure. "The spirit of Durin is not in stone or jewel," he said quietly. "It lives in us, in every hammer strike, every hall we build, every burden we bear. The amulet was never meant to be kept, only to remind us." The company bowed their heads. None spoke further. They gathered their gear, and when dawn came, they began the long road home. The journey south was slow and grim. The mountains watched in silence, their peaks gleaming like blades beneath the sun. The dwarves buried their dead beneath a cairn of stone, carved with runes of remembrance. Upon the highest rock, Durin placed a shard of blue crystal, the last remnant of the amulet, and spoke the ancient words of farewell. "Sleep now, sons of stone. Your labor is done, your names will endure."
When they at last beheld Erebor upon the horizon, shining in the morning light, their hearts were heavy yet steadfast. Word of their return spread swiftly through the halls, and when Durin entered the king's hall, all knelt in silence before him. He raised his hand. "Rise, my kin," he said. "We have lost much, yet we have gained what cannot be broken." That night he stood alone in the great hall of stone, gazing upon the ancient throne of Thorin Oakenshield. The air was still, the torches burning low. From the forges below came the sound of hammers, steady, enduring, eternal. Durin smiled faintly. "So the fire yet burns," he murmured, "and while it does, the line of Durin endures." Far away in the ruins of Narug-Zahar, the mountain lay quiet beneath snow. Deep within its heart, amid the ashes of gold, a faint blue glow stirred once more, soft, hidden, and waiting. The dragon's amulet was not gone, it had merely gone to sleep, and in the silence of the earth it dreamed of stone and of kings yet unborn. In the days that followed their return, Erebor was filled with song once more. Bells rang from the high halls, and the forges blazed brighter than ever before. The tale of Durin's journey spread swiftly through the mountain, how the king under the mountain had ventured into the frozen north, slain the dragon Frerung, and recovered the lost amulet of the first fathers, only to see it shatter by treachery and fire. Yet though the relic was gone, the people took heart from his deeds. For the courage of Durin and his companions became a new legend among the Longbeards, a proof that even in the waning years of the Third Age, the fire of the dwarves had not dimmed. Still, Durin himself was not at peace. He moved through the great halls like a shadow among his own people, greeting them with warmth, yet bearing a quiet weariness in his eyes. He had seen the depths of the world and heard the whisper of dragons, and at night, when sleep would not come, he dreamt of the amulet, not as it was when he held it, but as it lay shattered in the snow, its light fading into the earth. One such night, as he walked the upper galleries, he came upon Fror the lore keeper gazing out over the forges below. The old dwarf turned, his long beard gleaming silver in the torchlight. "You do not rest, my king," he said gently. Durin smiled faintly. "Nor do you, it seems." Fror chuckled, the sound like gravel tumbling. "Age leaves little room for sleep. But you are still young, Durin, too young to bear the weight of ghosts." Durin stepped beside him. The forge fires glowed far beneath, lighting the cavernous hall with red and gold. "I wonder," he said quietly, "whether I was meant to find it at all. The amulet? It was never truly ours to keep. Perhaps it was testing us." Fror's brow furrowed. "A test? Of heart, perhaps," Durin said. "Of pride? Varric's greed destroyed it, but the fault was not his alone. I, too, was tempted. I felt its call." The old dwarf sighed. "All great treasures call to those who bear them. But take heart. What was lost in stone may yet live in spirit. You brought back more than the amulet, my king. You brought back hope." Durin said nothing, but his gaze drifted toward the dark archways beyond the forges, where ancient tunnels delved deeper into the mountain's roots. "Hope," he murmured, "is a fine thing, but hope alone will not reclaim Khazad-dûm." At those words, Fror's eyes flickered with surprise. "You mean to—" Durin turned toward him, and in his face there was the same unyielding strength that had belonged to the kings of old. "Aye, Erebor is strong again, and our people are many. The time will come when we return to the halls of our fathers. Moria waits for the sons of Durin. Fror bowed his head, awe and dread mingling in his expression. Then may Allah guide your hand, my lord, for the shadow there is deep, and the name of Durin will either shine anew or be forgotten forever. Months passed, and winter gave way to spring. Snow melted from the slopes of the lonely mountain, and the river running sparkled like glass beneath the sun. Yet the peace that had settled over the realm was not to last. One evening, as the dwarves feasted in the great hall, a messenger stumbled through the gates, mud-stained, breathless, his cloak torn by claw and fang. "Orcs," he gasped, "orcs from the north. They have come down from the gray mountains, burning and slaying in the valleys of Dale." The hall fell silent. Durin rose at once. "How many?" "A host," the messenger wheezed, "led by a great chieftain bearing a banner black as coal, marked with the eye." A murmur ran through the company. Though Sauron had fallen, remnants of his servants still lingered scattered across the wild. Some whispered that, even in defeat, his malice endured, driving beasts and orcs alike to vengeance. Durin wasted no time. Within the hour, the horns of Erebor rang out, summoning warriors to arms. Narin and Fundar rode at his side as the gates opened and the host of the mountain marched forth. The fires of their torches burned bright against the night as they crossed the plains toward Dale. They came too late to prevent the first onslaught. Smoke rose from the valley, the air stank of blood and ash. But the defenders of Dale, led by King Bard II, still held the walls. When the dwarves arrived, a great cheer went up, and the tide of battle turned. Steel met steel, and the plain rang with the cries of war. Fundar fought like a whirlwind, his laughter echoing even amid the din. Narin's axe cleaved through mail and helm alike, his shield splintered, but his arm unbroken. Durin himself waded into the thick of the enemy, his voice rising in the ancient battle cry of the Longbeards. "Baruch Khazad, Khazad Imenu!" Axes glittered beneath the moon, and the orc host broke before them. The chieftain fell beneath Durin's blow, his banner trampled in the snow. When dawn came, the valley was silent, save for the mourning of the wounded and the crackle of dying fires. Durin stood upon the field, his armor streaked with soot and blood. Bard approached, weary but unbowed. "You have my thanks, Durin, son of Dain," he said. "Had you not come, Dale would have fallen." Durin shook his head. "Dale stands because its people are strong. We fight as one people, or not at all." The two clasped forearms in respect. For a moment, the bond between men and dwarves shone as brightly as it had in the days of old. When the wounded were tended and the pyres lit, Durin climbed a nearby ridge to watch the sunrise. The first light of day fell upon the snow, turning it to gold. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the wind from the north upon his face. Fror joined him, leaning on his staff. "The shadow stirs again," the old dwarf said quietly. "Perhaps it never truly sleeps." Durin nodded. "No, evil does not die. It only hides. But so too does the strength of our people. It may fade, but it is never lost." He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the distant peaks of the misty mountains caught the morning light. "We will return there one day," he said softly. "To the halls beneath the mountain, to the deep places where our fathers walked. We will reclaim Khazad-dûm, not for gold or glory, but because it is ours." Fror smiled faintly. "And if the darkness rises again?" Durin's eyes were steady. "Then we shall meet it in the deep, as we always have. for stone endures when all else falls. The wind rose, carrying the scent of forge smoke from Erebor and pine from the northern hills. It whispered through their beards and armor, a voice old as the world itself. In that moment, beneath the rising sun, Durin felt the pulse of something ancient in the earth beneath his feet, a rhythm like the beating of a buried heart. And though the amulet was gone, he thought he felt its light once more, faint but steady, burning deep within the bones of the world. Far to the north, beneath the snows of Narug-Zahar, a soft blue glow flickered and faded, as though answering his thought. The mountain slept again, its dreams full of gold, flame, and the unending song of stone, and thus ended the first journey of Durin the Seventh, king of Erebor, heir of the Longbeards, and the last of the Durins yet born. But his tale was not ended, for the road to Khazad-dûm still lay before him, dark and waiting. The fire of Durin's folk had been rekindled, and in the deep places of the world, ancient things began once more to stir. The snows melted from the slopes of Erebor, and the mountain's forges thundered with renewed life. From every hall came the ring of hammers, the echo of chisels, the deep, proud song of smiths at work. Yet Durin the Seventh found no rest. He spent his days walking among the artisans, learning the crafts of stone and steel as his forefathers had done, and his nights studying the ancient maps that spoke of the deep roads beneath the earth. Khazad-dûm haunted his thoughts. It came to him in dreams, its vast pillars veiled in mist, its forges silent, its bridges broken. In those dreams he heard the faint murmur of running water and the echo of hammers long stilled. Always there was a light, a dim, distant gleam that drew him onward, though he could never reach it before waking. Fror saw the change in him. "You walk with shadowed eyes, my king," the old lore-keeper said one morning as they stood before the gates of Erebor, watching the dawn spill gold across the valley. Durin did not deny it. "I have seen the glories of the north and the ruin that swallowed them, but still I hear the call of the deep. Erebor is our home, yet it is not the heart of our people. That lies still beneath the world." Fror's gaze was grave. "The deep halls are cursed, Durin. The Balrog of Morgoth perished there, yes, but fire leaves long shadows. Evil once rooted in stone is not easily driven out." Durin turned to him, his eyes bright as the forge flame. "Cursed or not, Khazad-dûm was ours before any shadow fell. I will not see it forgotten." Word of the king's intent spread swiftly through the mountain. Some rejoiced at the thought of reclaiming their lost city, while others muttered in fear, but none could doubt the strength of Durin's will. He began to gather maps, records, and relics from every corner of the dwarven realms. Messengers rode to the Iron Hills, to the Blue Mountains, even to the halls of Gimli, son of Glóin, in Aglarond. Gimli's reply came with a company of hardy folk, bearing tools and supplies. The old warrior himself no longer traveled far, but his letter, written in a hand both bold and plain, bore these words: "To Durin, king under the mountain, the fire of our fathers still burns. If the halls of Moria are to be reclaimed, then it is by your hand it shall be done. Yet remember this: the strength of the dwarves is not in the gold we win, but in the hearts that endure. May Aule's blessing go with you into the deep places. Gimli, lord of the glittering caves." Durin held that letter long after the messenger departed. Its words were a balm and a burden both. He took it as a sign. Preparations began in earnest. For 3 years, they labored. Great wagons rolled from Erebor bearing stone and timber, rope and iron, food and oil. Warriors trained in the deep mines learning to fight in darkness. Maps were copied and studied until the runes blurred before weary eyes. When the time came, Durin chose his companions carefully. Narin, his steadfast captain. Fundar, the bold-hearted descendant of Dwalin. Fror, the lore keeper, and 200 warriors of proven courage. They would travel through the Redhorn Pass where the snows lay treacherous and deep, and descend into the west gate of Moria, now long sealed by time. Before they departed, Durin stood once more before the throne of Erebor. The people gathered to bid him farewell. The great gates stood open, the morning light flooding the hall. "My kin," Durin said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our fathers built these halls with fire and song, but beyond these walls lie the roots of our people where Durin the Deathless first woke beside the lake of Mirrormere. We go to reclaim that heritage, not for gold, but for remembrance. Whatever fate awaits us, we go as sons of stone, bound by craft and courage." The dwarves raised their voices in answer, a thunder of pride that rolled through the mountain like a storm. Then the company set out, banners snapping in the wind, their armor gleaming beneath the pale sun. The road was long and bitter. The snows of the misty mountains came early that year, and the wind howled through the passes like a living thing. Yet they pressed onward, for Durin led them with a will unshaken. At last they reached the Dimril Dale, where the waters of Keled Zarum lay still and dark beneath the starlight. The dwarves camped upon the shore, for none could pass that place without pause. There, in the heart of the dale, Durin knelt beside the lake. The waters mirrored his face, calm and bright, and though his beard was dark and his years were few, he saw reflected there the crown of stars that shone above his brow. For a moment his breath caught. Narin stepped beside him, awed. "The crown of Durin," he whispered. "The same as it was in the First Age." Durin rose slowly, his voice steady. "Then let it be a sign. The line of Durin still endures." They passed the night in silence. When dawn came, they moved to the western cliffs, where the ancient doors of Moria were said to lie. Snow had drifted high against the rock, and time had buried all trace of path or stair. But Durin would not yield. They cleared the ice with axes and torches, until at last the outline of the doors began to show, pale lines of mithril faint as moonlight. The runes upon the arch were worn, yet the inscription still glimmered faintly. Enin Durin Aran Moria, Pedo Melina Minnow. The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria. Speak, friend, and enter. Fundar laughed softly. A jest of old, is it not? Say the word, my king. Durin smiled, though his eyes were solemn. Melon, he said, and the word of friendship rang through the air. For a moment nothing happened. Then the lines of mithril flared bright, and the ancient doors swung open with a sound like a sigh. Cold air drifted from the dark beyond, heavy with the scent of stone and dust. Narin lifted his torch. The flame flickered, casting long shadows upon the threshold. "The road into the deep," he murmured. Durin stepped forward, his axe in hand. "The road home." They entered the blackness of Moria. The light of the torches gleamed on pillars vast as mountains and walls carved with runes half buried in dust. The sound of their boots echoed endlessly, as though the halls themselves were whispering back. No orc cry rose to greet them, no creature stirred, only the silence of ages. Frore touched a broken stair and sighed. Once these halls rang with song. Now only memory walks here. Durin's voice was low but firm. Then we shall bring the song again. So the sons of Durin entered Khazad-dûm once more. The darkness closed behind them, and the mountain shuddered, as though it remembered their coming. Far away, beneath the buried ruins of Narug-Zahar, a faint blue spark flickered into life. It pulsed once, twice, then steadied, a breath awakening in the deep. The dragon's amulet stirred, and the echo of its light traveled through stone and shadow, whispering across leagues of earth to the halls of Moria, where the last of the Durins walked once more into legend. The echo of their footsteps faded into the vast hollows of Khazad-dûm. For long hours, the company moved in silence, their torches sending rippling light across pillars so tall they vanished into darkness. The air was cold and dry, thick with the dust of centuries. Even the sound of their breath seemed too loud, as though the mountain itself were listening. Durin walked at the head of the company, his axe glinting faintly in the gloom. Each step felt heavy with the weight of the past. These were the halls of his forefathers, the seat of Durin the Deathless, and yet now they lay in ruin. Shattered bridges gaped across chasms, forges lay silent, and the runes upon the walls were half devoured by time. At last they came upon a great hall, wide as a valley and roofed with shadow. The remnants of mighty columns rose around them like the trunks of a petrified forest. In the center stood a broken dais, upon which still rested the stump of a throne. Dust lay thick upon it, yet faint carvings could still be seen, the 7 stars and the crown of Durin. Frore the lore-keeper knelt before it, his voice trembling. The Hall of Kings. Here the lords of old held court when the world was young. Durin bowed his head, and now their heir returns to ashes. He turned to the others. This place shall not remain silent. Light the forges. We will bring back the fire. They set to work. Torches were thrust into long dead braziers, and the blackened pits of the furnaces were cleared of rubble. The dwarves sang as they labored, their voices low and sonorous, echoing through the endless vaults. Bit by bit, the ancient hall awoke. The first tongues of flame licked upward, painting the walls with red light. When the fires at last took hold, the company gathered around them. The glow revealed carvings upon the pillars, scenes of craft and battle, of hammers raised and dragons slain. Durin traced one with his hand, feeling the deep-cut lines. Our fathers built this in the dawn of the world, he said softly, and their skill still outshines all that we have wrought since. Naren stirred the coals with his axe blade. Then let us build again, my king. Let Khazad-dûm know the song of the forge once more. Durin smiled faintly. So we shall. They spent 3 days in that hall, repairing, clearing, exploring the tunnels that led outward from it. Much had fallen, but some passages still stood, strong and sound. They found storehouses sealed with iron, their contents long turned to dust, and chambers where the bones of dwarves lay in silence, axes still clutched in bony hands. The memory of the Balrog's ruin clung to every stone, yet no living foe stirred in the deep. On the 4th night, as Durin kept watch alone, a strange wind whispered through the corridors. It was faint but clear, carrying with it the scent of cold water. He followed it, torch in hand, until he came to a narrow stair that wound downward into shadow. He descended cautiously. The air grew damp and cool, and soon he heard the murmur of running water. The stair opened into a wide cavern lit by a faint blue glow. Before him lay an underground river, clear as glass, its surface trembling with light that came from beneath. Durin knelt by the shore. The glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, soft and steady. He reached into the water, and there, beneath the rippling surface, lay a shard of blue crystal. His breath caught. It was small, no larger than a coin, but unmistakable. The fragment of the dragon's amulet. He lifted it from the water. It was cool in his palm, yet it burned faintly with an inner fire. The same light that had shone in the lair of Frarung now flickered weakly in his hand, as if waking from a long sleep. He turned it over, and faint runes appeared upon its surface. Runes older than Khazad-dûm itself, written in the script of the first fathers. They glowed softly, then dimmed again. Durin stood motionless, the torchlight dancing on the water. At last he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "So you have followed me here, old friend." When he returned to the Hall of Kings, he found Fror waiting. The old lorekeeper saw the shard and drew in a sharp breath. "By the Maker, the amulet lives still?" "In part," Durin answered, "a fragment only, but it found its way to the deep." Fror studied it in awe. "Perhaps it was never meant to die. The craft of the deathless Durin cannot be unmade so easily." Durin gazed into the flickering blue light. "It has chosen its resting place well. Here, in the heart of the world, it belongs." But the shard's discovery did not go unnoticed. The next day, while the company labored in the forges, a sound came faintly from the tunnels beyond, a slow tapping like stones knocking together. At first they thought it the settling of the mountain, then came a whisper, low and harsh, carried on the draft. "Khazad, Khazad." Narin froze. "Orcs?" Durin listened, his hand tightening upon his axe. The whisper came again, nearer this time, followed by the clatter of metal. "Ready yourselves," he said quietly. "The deep is not as empty as we thought." They formed ranks in the narrow hall, shields locked, torches guttering in the stale air. From the darkness ahead came a sudden shriek, and a tide of black shapes surged forward, orcs lean and pale, their eyes glinting red. The clash was terrible. Steel rang on steel, and the cries of battle echoed through the deep. Fundar roared as he swung his hammer, felling foes by the dozen. Narin stood shoulder to shoulder with his king, their blades flashing like mirrored fire. Durin fought with grim resolve, every strike guided by purpose. "For the halls of our fathers!" he shouted, and the company answered with one voice, their battle cry rolling through the chamber like thunder. "Baruch Khazad, Khazad Aimenu." The orcs fell back, snarling, but more came behind them. The fight spread into the side tunnels, torches flaring and dying as the battle raged. Blood darkened the floor, and the air grew thick with smoke and dust. At last, when the final echo faded, silence returned. The ground was strewn with corpses. Many dwarves had fallen, yet the company held the hall. Durin stood among the slain, his armor dented, his beard streaked with ash. "They knew we were here," he said grimly. "The dark has watchers still." Fror bent over a fallen orc and frowned. Its armor was crude, but upon its helm was etched a symbol, a twisted flame within a circle. "The mark of the deep shadow," he murmured. "These are no common tribes. Something drives them." Durin turned the shard of the amulet over in his hand. It glimmered faintly, as if in answer. "Then the dark stirs again," he said, "and it knows our name." He gazed into the blackness of the tunnels where unseen things whispered and waited. The light of the forges burned behind him, steady but small amid the vast night of Moria. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Khazad-dûm will not fall again, not while Durin's fire yet burns." And in the depths below, where the waters whispered around the bones of the mountain, a faint blue light glowed brighter, spreading through the stone like veins of fire, as though answering his vow. The heart of the earth had begun to wake. The days that followed were heavy with labor and watchfulness. The forges of Moria burned once again, though the light they cast was pale beside the golden fires of old. Durin and his company toiled ceaselessly to fortify the lower halls, sealing off the tunnels that led into the deep, repairing bridges and carving new chambers for their use. Each clang of hammer upon anvil was both a defiance and a prayer, a declaration that Khazad-dûm yet lived. Still, the shadow at their backs did not rest. The orcs that had attacked them were but the vanguard of something older and more cunning. Strange sounds echoed at night, the scrape of claws on stone, the whisper of voices speaking in tongues not heard since the elder days. The dwarves took turns keeping watch, their torches burning low, their weapons always within reach. Durin found little rest. Often he stood alone in the great hall, the shard of the dragon's amulet cupped in his palm. Its blue light had grown stronger since the battle, and sometimes, when all was silent, he thought he heard faint murmurs rising from it like the echo of a deep forge far away. Fror urged caution. "Such things are made for power, not comfort. Do not listen too closely, my king. Even the craft of Durin the Deathless might hide snares." Durin smiled wearily. "I listen not for power, old friend, but for remembrance. Perhaps it is the mountain that speaks through it." Fror shook his head. "Perhaps. But mountains remember both light and shadow." One evening, while the dwarves repaired a collapsed stairway, Fundar returned from a scouting patrol, his armor dusted with ash and his expression grim. "There's movement in the deep," he said. "I followed an old air shaft down toward the lower mines. The tunnels there are alive again. Fires burn where no dwarf kindled them." Durin's eyes darkened. "How far?" 2 leagues beneath us, perhaps more. The air was foul, and I heard drums, slow and distant. The mention of drums stirred unease among the company. No dwarf alive had forgotten the tales of Balin's fall, or the dread that had once come beating up from the darkness. Durin straightened. "Then we go down. If fire burns beneath our halls, we must see who lights it." Despite the protests of some, the king gathered 30 of his strongest warriors and descended through the eastern shafts. They passed through ancient workings where mithril veins once shone like stars in the stone, now blackened and broken. The deeper they went, the warmer the air grew, and the faint glow of red flickered along the tunnel walls. At last, they reached a vast cavern where an ancient forge had once stood, but where the dwarves had once wrought their craft, now sprawled a crude encampment. Orcs by the hundreds, their fires belching smoke, their weapons gleaming with new-forged iron. They were larger than most, pale-skinned and armored in jagged steel. Upon their standards burned the same mark Fror had seen before, the twisted flame within a circle. Durin watched from the shadows of a broken arch, his jaw set. "They are forging weapons," he said. "Someone commands them." Narin's eyes narrowed. "And not just any orcs. These are soldiers, disciplined." Freer peered closer, his voice low. "Look there, beyond the forges." Durin followed his gaze. A Upon a dais of black stone stood a figure cloaked in dark mail, its helm wrought in the likeness of a serpent's head. In its hand gleamed a long, curved blade that shimmered with red light. Around it, the orcs knelt. Fundar's grip tightened on his hammer. A new lord, then? Durin studied the figure. Something in its bearing struck him like a blow of memory, graceful yet cruel, proud and ancient. When it spoke, its voice carried through the cavern deep and cold. "Brothers of the flame," it said, "the time of darkness is not ended. The fire of the worm still burns, though his flesh is long gone. By my hand the wrath of the north shall rise again." The dwarves felt the heat surge, and even from afar Durin could see the faint shimmer of blue fire kindling along the blade's edge, the same hue as the dragon's amulet. Fror's face went pale. "By the Maker, that sword bears the light of your relic." Durin's blood ran cold. Then the shards were not lost after all. The figure raised its weapon high, and the cavern roared with the answering cries of the orcs. Durin motioned his company back. "We have seen enough. If this enemy wields the fire of Durin's craft, then our peril is greater than I feared." They withdrew silently through the tunnels, though every sound seemed to echo 100-fold. When they returned to the upper halls, the dwarves gathered around their king, waiting. Durin laid the fragment of the amulet upon the stone table. Its light now flickered fitfully, as though agitated. "The relic was not destroyed," he said. "It shattered, and part of its power has fallen into darker hands. Whoever commands the orcs bears a piece of it." Fundar frowned. "And what manner of creature takes such power and lives?" Freer answered, his tone grave. "Not an orc lord alone. I have heard whispers of things that walk the dark, spirits bound to ancient fire, neither dragon nor man. If the amulet's flame found such a host, then we face an evil we have not seen since the elder days." Durin's hand clenched around his axe. "Then we shall face it. The fire was ours once. It shall be ours again." The following night the enemy struck. It began with tremors underfoot, faint but growing, until the walls shuddered and dust fell from the ceilings. Then came the sound of horns, harsh and deep, followed by the tramp of countless feet. "By the forges!" Narin bellowed. "They found the upper halls!" The dwarves rushed to arms. Barricades were raised, the forges extinguished, and the narrow tunnels filled with defenders. The orcs poured through the lower ways, their torches casting mad light upon the walls. The clash was fierce, the air thick with smoke and screams. Durin fought at the forefront, his axe cleaving through helms and shields. Every blow rang with fury. "For Khazad-dûm!" he cried, and his warriors roared in answer. Then amid the chaos, the serpent-helmed figure appeared. It moved through fire and death untouched, its sword burning with blue flame. When it spoke, its voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Durin's heir," it called. "You cannot reclaim what was taken. The fire of dragons answers only to flame." Durin strode forward to meet it, his eyes blazing. "Then I shall quench that fire with my own blood if I must." Their blades met with a sound like clashing bells. Sparks burst in showers of blue and red. The force of each blow cracked the stones beneath their feet. The creature laughed, a sound both human and inhuman. "You cannot destroy what you are bound to. The same craft that made your relic made me." Durin struck again, his axe biting deep into its shoulder. The thing staggered, yet its laughter did not cease. With a sweep of its burning sword, it sent a wave of flame across the hall. The dwarves fell back, shielding their king. The enemy retreated into the shadows, the sound of its voice fading into the depths. When silence returned, the halls were blackened and broken. The fires of the forges had gone out, and the air stank of ash and blood. Durin knelt amid the ruin, his hands still trembling from the battle. The shard of the amulet lying near the hearth glowed faintly once more, but its light was dimmer now, as though wounded. Fror came to his side. "The fire is not gone," he said softly, "but it is divided." Durin closed his eyes. "Then we must gather what remains, before the mountain itself burns." Far below, deep in the lost forges of Moria, the serpent-helmed figure watched the dying flames. Blue fire coiled about its sword, like a living thing. "The fire of Durin," it whispered, "will return to its rightful heir through blood and flame." And the mountain answered with a low, rumbling growl, as if waking from a long sleep. Smoke hung thick in the great halls of Khazad-dûm. The battle had passed, but its scars remained upon every stone. The forges lay cold once more, their fires quenched by ash. The wounded were tended in silence, while the dead were laid out in rows along the Hall of Kings. Their armor, blackened by flame, gleamed faintly in the dim torchlight. Durin walked among them, his heart heavy. Each face was known to him, each name carved into his memory. The mountain had taken its due again, and still the darkness stirred beneath their feet. Fror came to stand beside him. "You did what you must, my king," he said softly. "The foe was driven back, and the upper halls are ours." Durin shook his head. "For now. But that creature, whatever it was, will not rest." It spoke as though the fire itself obeyed it. Fror's eyes were grave. "A spirit of flame, perhaps. The old tales speak of lesser drakes, remnants of Morgoth's brood, whose bodies perished, but whose spirits lingered in the deep places of the world. Such a one could have found the shard and been reforged by it." Durin gazed toward the blackened tunnels. "Then I shall find it and end it before its flame consumes this mountain." 2 days later, the survivors gathered in the rebuilt hall. Narin, grim and unyielding, stood at Durin's right hand. Fundar, his laughter gone to silence, bore a new hammer forged from the ruins of the old. Fror sat nearby, poring over a half-burned map recovered from the archives. "The creature's lair lies far below," he said, "beyond the lower forges, near the pits once called Barad-dûm. Few dwarves ever went there, even in the elder days. It was said that the air itself burned." Durin nodded slowly. "Then that is where we go." Narin frowned. "You would take so few of us? The tunnels are crawling with orcs. We cannot face the entire horde." "We will not," Durin replied. "You will hold the upper halls, keep our people safe. I will go with a small company into the deep, quiet and unseen. This flame must be quenched at its source." So it was decided. At dawn, Durin descended with 10 warriors into the blackened shafts. They carried no banners, and their armor was blackened to hide its gleam. Their torches burned low, their steps muffled. Down and down they went, through tunnels untouched by light. For an age, the air grew hotter with each passing league. Sweat streamed down their faces, and the metal of their helms burned to the touch. The walls themselves seemed to shimmer faintly, alive with veins of dull red fire. At last they came to a cavern vast beyond measure. A great chasm split the floor, and from its depths rose a glow like molten gold. The heat struck them like a wave. "There," Durin said, pointing across the gulf. "Do you see it?" A Across the chasm stood a forge of black stone, tall and narrow as a spire. Above it burned a single flame, blue and pure, rising without smoke or shadow, and before the forge knelt the serpent-helmed figure. It turned at their approach, its armor shining with reflected fire. "You return, heir of stone," it said, its voice calm, almost gentle. "Did you come to see what your fathers began?" Durin raised his axe. "You wield a power not meant for your kind. That shard belongs to me, and to none but the house of Durin." The creature laughed, a sound that echoed like breaking iron. "Belongs? You speak of ownership as if the fire can be tamed. Foolish dwarf. The flame does not serve blood. It chooses, and it has chosen me." As it spoke, the sword in its hand flared brighter, and the blue light filled the cavern. The warriors behind Durin staggered, shielding their eyes. "Hold," Durin cried. "Remember your fathers." The company charged, voices raised in the old war song of the deep. The clash was like thunder. Axes bit against steel, and sparks flew in a storm of light. The creature fought like a storm unbound, its blade cutting arcs of fire through the air. Durin met it head-on. His axe struck the burning sword, and the cavern rang with the sound of clashing wills. "You are no heir of fire," he shouted. "You are its slave." The serpent helm tilted, and for an instant Durin saw beneath it, not a face but a hollow blaze, the ghost of a dragon's eye. "I am the echo of flame eternal," it hissed, "born of Skatha's wrath and your own pride." Then it struck. The blade drove against Durin's shield, splitting it in two. The heat seared his arm, yet he held his ground. With a roar, he swung Barazrun, and the axe bit deep into the creature's side. Flame erupted. The shock threw both to the ground. Durin rose first, gasping, the heat burning his throat. The creature staggered, its armor cracked and smoking, blue fire leaking from the seams. "Your fire is spent," Durin said. "End this." But the serpent-helmed figure only laughed. "Spent? No, son of stone, it is free." It thrust its sword into the forge. The blue flame roared upward, swallowing the figure whole. The cavern shook as molten rock burst from the chasm, flooding the floor. "Back!" Durin shouted. "Back to the upper tunnels!" The dwarves fled as the world behind them turned to fire. Lava poured through the corridors, consuming all in its path. The roar of the mountain was deafening. When at last they reached the higher halls, the heat still chased them. The floor quaked beneath their feet, and walls split asunder. Naren met them at the gate, his eyes wide. "What have you done?" Durin fell to one knee, his armor scorched, his axe blackened. "I have freed the fire. The creature is gone, but the flame remains." Even as he spoke, a sound like thunder rolled through the mountain. From the lowest pits rose a new light, not red nor gold, but blue, bright as the heart of the sea. It streamed upward through cracks in the stone, flowing like water through the halls. The dwarves stared in awe. The walls glowed as if filled with living veins of light. The fire did not burn them. It warmed the air, filling it with a hum like distant song. Fror approached slowly, eyes wide. "It is the amulet's fire," he whispered. Freed from bondage, it remembers its maker. Durin stood, gazing at the light that danced along the ceiling. The shard he carried pulsed in answer, its glow merging with the radiance around them. "So the mountain itself bears our legacy," he said softly. "The fire of Durin endures, not as a weapon, but as a heart reborn." All through the night, the blue flames spread, coursing through forgotten tunnels and broken chambers, awakening veins of mithril that shone once more. The dwarves watched in silence, wonder on their faces. When morning came, the fires had settled, leaving the stone warm beneath their feet. The halls glowed faintly as though lit from within. Durin stood upon the dais of the broken throne, his eyes reflecting the light. "Khazad-dûm lives again," he said, "not by gold nor by conquest, but by fire remembered. This mountain is no tomb, it is a forge." The dwarves bowed, their voices rising in a low, deep chant that rolled through the halls like the breath of the world. Far beneath them, in the buried forges, where no light had shone for an age, the serpent-helmed armor lay empty amid the cooling stone. Its blade, still burning faintly, sank into the molten river and was lost. The mountain sighed, and the blue light flickered gently like the heartbeat of something vast and newly awakened. Khazad-dûm was no longer dead. It dreamed again of flame and hammer, of song and stone, and of the unbroken will of Durin's line. The light of the reborn fire lingered through the halls for many days. Where once dust and shadow had lain, now a gentle azure glow traced the runes upon the walls, flowing through cracks in the stone like the veins of a living mountain. The dwarves moved through Khazad-dûm with reverence, touching the walls as though greeting a long-lost friend. The fire did not burn as ordinary flame. It was cold to the touch, yet filled the air with warmth and song. When struck, the anvils rang clearer. When forged, the steel shone brighter. It was as if the ancient craft of the fathers of the dwarves had awakened anew. Durin walked often through those halls, his heart both light and heavy. The serpent-helmed foe was gone, his evil consumed in the awakening of the flame. Yet Durin knew the cost. Many of his folk lay buried beneath the mountain, and the power that now filled Khazad-dûm was not theirs to command. It was something older, wilder, and bound to the deep will of the earth itself. Fror the lore-keeper watched the fire from the threshold of the great forge. "It is beautiful," he said softly, "and yet, my king, I fear it. Nothing born of the world's first days is ever tamed. Even this blessing might one day turn." Durin nodded. "Perhaps, but the dwarves do not flee from fire. We master it. We shall learn its ways, honor it, and keep it as our fathers once did." "Do you believe this the same flame your ancestor bound within the amulet?" asked Fror. Durin looked toward the nearest wall where the blue light pulsed faintly, steady as a heartbeat. "I do. The relic was not meant to be possessed by one hand, nor hidden away in hoard or tomb. It was the spirit of creation itself, the will to endure, to build, to defy the dark. That spirit belongs to all our people." Word spread swiftly through the mountain. Messengers rode to Erebor, to the Iron Hills, to the glittering caves in the south, carrying tidings that Khazad-dûm was no longer lost. Many who heard wept to know that Durin's halls shone once more. Within months, small companies of dwarves began to arrive, craftsmen, miners, smiths, and warriors, following the call of their king. The once empty chambers filled with laughter and the clamor of tools. Great stone doors were cleared of rubble, bridges rebuilt, forges relit, and always the blue light watched over them, flickering softly in the depths. Durin's rule grew strong, but he never forgot the perils beneath. Scouts patrolled the lower levels, and sentinels were posted near the chasms where the ancient fire had first risen. For though the blue flame glowed peacefully, strange sounds still echoed from the deep. One night, as the dwarves feasted in the newly rebuilt Hall of Kings, the ground trembled faintly. The cups upon the tables rattled, dust drifted from the ceiling. A hush fell across the company. Durin rose at once, his hand upon the hilt of his axe. "Do not fear," he said. "The mountain shifts in its sleep, but it will not break." Fror, ever cautious, leaned close. "Still it dreams, my king, and dreams may turn to waking." In the following weeks, Durin sought to understand the power that flowed through the mountain. He descended often into the deep forges where the blue fire burned strongest. There he would sit for hours in silence, feeling its warmth against his skin, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. Once, as he lingered there alone, the flames stirred. They rose higher, swirling into shapes like the runes of old, and a sound like distant hammering filled the air. Durin knelt, awestruck. "Father of us all," he whispered, "all of the Maker, if this be your gift, guide me that I may not lead my people astray." The fire flared, casting his shadow upon the walls, a great and towering form crowned with stars, like the image he had seen once in the waters of Mirrormere. When the light dimmed again, he felt a deep calm settle over him, as though the mountain itself had spoken in answer. He returned to his people that evening, his eyes alight with quiet strength. "Fear not the fire," he told them. "It's not our foe, but our inheritance. We are the children of stone and flame, and we shall honor both." Years passed, and under Durin's hand, Khazad-dûm flourished once more. The mines yielded mithril again, shining purer than any found before. The forges sang with life, and the songs of the dwarves echoed through the deeps. Dale and Erebor traded richly with them, and the men of the north spoke with wonder of the blue-lit mountain where Durin ruled. But deep below, in the forgotten fissures, where the serpent-helmed foe had perished, the remnants of that darker flame still smoldered. It whispered within the cracks of the world, waiting. One night as Durin slept, he dreamt once more of the lake of Mirrormere. He stood upon its shore, and his reflection shone with the crown of stars. Yet this time the water stirred, and a voice rose from beneath. "Fire cannot be unmade, son of stone. It only changes shape. Beware what you awaken." Durin woke with a start, his heart pounding. The blue glow outside his chamber pulsed faintly like the slow breathing of some vast sleeper. He rose and went to the balcony that overlooked the inner halls. All was peaceful. The dwarves slept, the forges hummed, but still the words of the dream lingered. He called for Fror and told him what he had seen. The old lorekeeper listened in silence, then nodded gravely. "It may be no more than memory, my king, or it may be a warning. Even fire that warms can burn." Durin looked down upon the living light that ran like rivers through the halls. "Then we shall remember the lesson of the amulet, that strength without wisdom brings ruin. The fire will remain, but we will not bow to it. It is part of us, not our master." Fror smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the shadow is ended at last." Durin did not answer. He looked toward the deep, where the faint glow of the forges shimmered like stars beneath the stone. "Ended?" he murmured. "No, old friend. Shadows never end. They only wait for the light to dim." He turned away, his cloak trailing upon the polished floor, and the whisper of his steps mingled with the hum of the sleeping fire. Far below the mountain, where no dwarf had walked since the battle, the molten rivers had cooled into glass. Yet in one hidden chamber, a single spark remained. It flickered weakly, guttered, and then, as if answering some unheard call, began to glow again. The light spread slowly, forming the faint outline of a hand, then the curve of a helm, wrought like a serpent's head. A hollow voice whispered through the darkness, half pain, half laughter. Fire remembers its master. Then the glow faded, vanishing into the cracks of the earth. High above, Durin stood upon his balcony, gazing into the depths, unaware that the mountain's long dream was not yet over. The fire he'd freed burned bright and true, but deep beneath it another fire, older, jealous, and bound to shadow, had begun to stir. The tale of Durin the Restorer would live in song for generations. Yet even as Khazad-dûm shone in renewed glory, the ancient balance of light and flame shifted once more, for in Middle-earth, no fire burns without casting a shadow. Long years passed beneath the mountain, and the halls of Khazad-dûm thrummed once more with life. The blue fire, the gift of the deep, pulsed through its roots and veins, lending new strength to the forges, new song to the anvils, and a steady heartbeat to the world of stone. Generations of dwarves were born beneath its light, and they called themselves the Rekindled. They built new bridges, restored old halls, and sang once again of Durin the Deathless, who first awoke beside Mirror in the elder days. King Durin VII reigned longer than any dwarf of that age. His beard turned from bronze to silver, but the fire in his eyes never dimmed. Each year he led a company to the gates of Mirror, there to lay wreaths of mithril leaves upon the water and renew the oath of his line. And each time the stars shone in the reflection upon his brow, as they had for Durin the Throne, in token that the blessing of the fathers yet endured. Peace endured for many years. The trade between Erebor, Dale, and the renewed Khazad-dûm brought wealth and joy to all the north. The men of Dale and the dwarves of the mountain became as brothers once more, and songs were sung of the alliance of the hammer and the bow. Even the elves of Mirkwood sent messengers, marveling that the old wound of the dwarves' pride had healed into wisdom. Yet even in peace, Durin's heart was seldom light, for in his dreams he still felt the deep rumble beneath the earth, like the slumbering breath of some vast creature. Sometimes, when he walked alone through the lower mines, he thought he heard faint echoes, like a hammer striking in rhythm with his own heart. He told no one of these dreams, not even Fror, who had grown frail with age, his beard white as frost. The old lore-keeper still kept his records, his trembling hands tracing runes that would preserve their age for centuries to come. "It is the mountain's memory, my king," Fror said once when Durin confessed his unease. "The earth never forgets. What you hear is the echo of what was, not what will be." Durin nodded, though his eyes lingered upon the shadows that dwelled in the deepest corners of the hall. "Perhaps," he murmured. "Yet I have learned that echoes sometimes grow into voices again." In the 100th year of Durin's reign, a new vein of mithril was discovered far below the foundations, near the ancient rifts of Barraz-dûm, where the serpent-helmed foe had once fallen. The miners, proud and eager, pressed on despite the heat that rose from the cracks. On the third day, one of them, a young dwarf named Thranel, came running up to the forges, his face pale beneath the soot. "My lord," he gasped when brought before the king, "there is something below. The stone is hot to the touch, and when we struck it, blue fire bled from the cracks. We thought it the blessing of the mountain, but then we heard a voice." Durin's heart sank. "A voice?" The young miner nodded. "It spoke in no tongue of dwarves or men. It called us kin of flame, and the light, it was not gentle, my lord.
It burned." Durin dismissed the frightened miners and gathered his captains. "We will see it for ourselves," he said. They descended into the deep mines where the air shimmered with heat and the walls glowed faintly with blue veins of light. The deeper they went, the louder the hum grew, a low, thrumming note that seemed to pulse through the bones. At last they reached the new vein. It ran like a river of light through the stone, brilliant and fierce. When Durin laid his hand upon it, pain shot up his arm. The light flared, and for an instant he saw shapes moving within it, shadows twisting like smoke, forming eyes that glowed with familiar fire. Fror drew back in fear. "It is alive," he whispered. "By the Maker, the flame itself lives." Then the mountain trembled, and a crack split the earth. From its depths rose a whisper, faint but clear. "I am the fire unending. You cannot bind what was never yours." Durin staggered back. The blue light surged, spreading along the floor like flowing water. It climbed the walls, devouring the shadows, until the entire cavern blazed with ghostly flame. The dwarves raised their shields against the glare. From the heart of the rift, a figure began to form, tall and shrouded, its helm shaped like a serpent's skull. Blue fire burned where eyes should have been. Durin's voice rang out. "You were destroyed." The figure laughed softly, a sound like crackling embers. "Destroyed? No, son of stone, fire cannot die. It changes form. You freed me from flesh. I am the flame eternal." Fror fell to his knees, weeping. "Mahal, preserve us." Durin stepped forward, gripping his axe. "You call yourself flame, yet you know nothing of its craft. Fire is for forging, not consuming. If you are born of my father's work, then I will unmake you by it." The creature raised its burning hand. "Then come, heir of Durin. Let us see whose fire endures." It struck. Blue fire erupted, searing through stone and steel alike. The dwarves fell back as molten rock poured from the walls. Durin charged, Barazrun blazing with the reflection of the fire that surrounded him. Axe met flame, and the air split with thunder. Their battle raged through the deep. Every strike sent ripples through the mountain. Every cry was echoed by the stone. Durin's armor smoked, his beard singed, but he fought on, his strength drawn from the will of all his forefathers. At last, with a roar that shook the world, he drove his axe deep into the creature's chest. The light flared blindingly bright, and the figure screamed, a sound of rage, pain, and release. Then it shattered like glass, the shards of its flame bursting outward in a storm of light. When the brilliance faded, only silence remained. The blue veins upon the walls dimmed, settling into a soft, steady glow. Durin fell to his knees, breathing hard. Around him his companions stirred, dazed and singed but alive. Fror crawled to his side, tears streaming down his face. "It is done," the old dwarf whispered. "You have ended it." Durin gazed into the faintly glowing rift. "No," he said softly, "I have set it free. The flame no longer belongs to any creature. It returns to the heart of the world, where Aulo first wrought it." He rose, leaning on his axe. "Seal this place. Let no pick or hammer strike here again. Some fires are meant to sleep." They obeyed his command. The deep mines were sealed, and the story of the battle was carved in runes upon the wall of the Hall of Kings, that none might forget the cost of pride and the peril of flame. Years later, when Durin's beard had turned white as frost and his strength began to wane, he stood once more beside the lake of Miramir. The stars shone upon the water, and their reflection crowned him as they had crowned the first Durin.
He smiled faintly, his breath misting in the cold air. "We are but keepers of the fire," he murmured. "It burns before us and after us, and though the hands that bear it may change, the flame itself endures." Then he turned from the lake and walked back toward Khazad-dûm, where the faint blue light still gleamed beneath the stone, no longer fierce, but steady and eternal. Thus ended the tale of Durin the Restorer, last of the great kings of the dwarves. The mountain he rekindled stood for ages beyond count, its forges singing, its halls filled with laughter, and though the fires of shadow sometimes stirred far below, they never rose again. For the fire of Durin, like the heart of stone itself, endured unbroken, shining quietly through the long twilight of the world.